This podcast is brought to you by Voice and Vision, bringing help, hope, and healing to individuals, families, and communities affected by mental illness, addictions, and disabilities in southeastern Pennsylvania.
Welcome to Untold Valor, a podcast with a unique focus on veterans, featuring stories of courage, recovery, perseverance, and strength. Listen to hear veterans share their perspectives on what it's like to battle mental health challenges, combat addictions, and overcome other adversities unique to those who have served.
Welcome into another edition of Untold Valor, Veterans Recovery in Action, a podcast with a unique focus on veterans with stories of courage, recovery, perseverance, and strength. Listen as veterans and mental health workers talk about their situations and their challenges and how to overcome adversities unique to those who have served or helping those who serve. Super excited once again to have Jeremy Stalnecker here with us on the podcast from Mighty Oaks Foundation. He is a USMC veteran, co-founder, and executive director at Mighty Oaks. And really going to talk this week. We kind of talked on the last episode about Jeremy's background, kind of did the 30,000-foot view, a little bit about Mighty Oaks again. We've had them on before, and we'll give out more information about how to get involved with Mighty Oaks, great organization. But I wanted to talk a little bit, Jeremy, this go around on really kind of just focusing on a few things for veterans or listeners of the podcast to maybe think about if they find themselves, kind of stuck in the quagmire a little bit, not sure where to turn, what to do, just how to get maybe going from the inside, not necessarily the resources, but, just the personal aspect of things. So with that said, obviously, first of all, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you, Mark. Really excited about being here again.
It's always good to have you. And of course, it's always good to have Reverend Ben, my friend. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to be here.
Always good to have you here, buddy, and always get your approach on things as well. So let's talk a little bit about kind of just when people find themselves. You've got two sections here, Jeremy, on your bio that I wanted to kind of focus on. One's called Making the Most of Your Mess, and the other one's called Still Here. So let's just kind of run through a little bit of this information and see how that helps. You kind of have on this Making the Most of Your Mess, how to find your own purpose in the midst of an overwhelming mess. And I think a lot of veterans feel like sometimes their life is a mess. It's chaotic or it's in disarray, right? Maybe the order or the structure of service is no longer there when you're out, right? And so how do you kind of get yourself, I guess, regimented, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. So, I approach and coming at this from a faith perspective, okay. I look at Bible stories, and there are great people in the Bible, great stories in the Bible that really help us with a lot of this. But one of those is an Old Testament prophet by the name of Elijah, and it's a crazy story about his life. But this was a guy who, as you look to the Old Testament, you read the Bible, you would see that God used him in an amazing way. But he had these moments of real doubt.
Sure.
Like he had these moments where he went from the mountaintop, so to speak, and he knew God was using him, and he was firing on all cylinders, to what we would look at now as probably, being clinically depressed. I mean, he went to a place of absolute despair, and he would go back and forth. And I love Bible stories for a lot of reasons. One of them is these are real people, and we can see ourselves kind of in that.
Absolutely.
But one of the things he ended up doing, and in the story of Elijah, and you can go find it, I won't go through the whole story, but he has this confrontation with a king and with false prophets, and he has to stand up and do a really hard thing. And that really hard thing is presenting the contrast between God and the false prophets. And it's an amazing story. But what happens in that story is that he redeems his past. I like this word redeem. It's found in the Bible, and we can think of it, like maybe you redeem a bottle, right? Because it has that redemption value, or
Sure.
You redeem something else, you turn it in. What redemption is, redeeming something, means that you are adding value where once there was no value. You have something that's worthless, but you can redeem it. When you turn it in, it becomes valuable to you. And we see this in the life of Elijah. With the ups and downs of his life, there was a moment where he said, all right, my past is my past, but God can use me now in a powerful way. And I think for all of us, we need to understand that, and I think we talked about this maybe briefly on our last episode together, that trauma is not something reserved for veterans. Trauma is not something that's unique to those who've served in combat or worn the uniform.
Correct.
Trauma is a life issue. Difficulties, trials, these things that we talk about, these are life issues. It comes to all of us. And so we're not unique in that sense when something difficult happens, but nor are we hopeless. If we allow our story to be redeemed, we can use it to be a help to other people. This is the message, right? It's understanding that maybe bad things have happened to me, but they've happened to a lot of other people as well. If I'll put in the work to move forward, and we can talk about that a little bit, but if I put in the work to move forward, when I start to see the pieces come back together in my life, I can then, and I would say I have a responsibility to, I can then reach back out to other people who are also struggling, helping them. And what that does, it helps them for sure, but it redeems my own brokenness. It makes the most out of the mess that I find myself in, because now my story is not just one of brokenness and hopelessness and worthlessness. My story has value because it's being used for someone else. And man, there's so much power in that. When we decide, look, this thing's not about me.
Mm-hmm.
It's about helping other people. That changes the whole conversation, and it changes even our ability to get up in the morning and do the next hard thing.
Reverend, come on in here with it.
Yeah. When you were speaking there, Jeremy, I was about to say amen. but it was so you were telling my story there. You were telling my story, and I was thinking about how it's an inside job. It's something that has to come from the inside of the veteran or anybody who's had trauma to change. And once we begin to have an inside job, our mindset will change. And that's what we do, is try to motivate people and point them in that direction. But all in all, the answer is really within that individual. So, and as far as helping, what you said, Jeremy, the true help comes through even the wounded veteran or the helping veteran is when you're helping somebody else and you look back, your problem is no longer there. Because you took a focus off of your pain for a minute and thought about another individual can change the whole perspective of everything.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
Jeremy, do you feel like veterans and Reverend as well, when you guys are talking with people who are struggling with moving forward or finding purpose, is it finding purpose or is it searching for absolution? Are they looking for something they can't quite attain internally, so that's what they're looking for externally?
I think it's yes to both of those things.
Okay.
I think they are looking for something that they can't find because they think that what they're looking for can be found, right? And so it's, what does that mean? Well, when we serve other people, we are engaging with the purpose for which we were created. It's really interesting. Those who've served in the military and those who served in the first responder community, they may get to a place of bitterness and brokenness and hurt, but most people go into those professions because they want to help or they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves and they want to connect to, something important. And so they do. Well, then they leave that profession or they find themselves hurt in the middle of that profession and they ask a question, what's my purpose now? Who am I now? What is this about? Well, it didn't change. The place may have changed. The uniform may have changed.
Okay.
The thing that you're doing may have changed. But your purpose is still to live for something bigger than yourself, to engage in helping other people, to use the tools, the opportunities, and the resources you have to be a blessing to others. Where we struggle is when we start to believe that this is about me and I need to find something that's going to make me feel better, that absolution, right? I need to deal with this internally. Well, you do, but the way you deal with that is by looking outside of yourself and helping other people. Now, there are very important and powerful tools that help you get there, that address what's going on inside of you. I'm not dismissing that. I'm not saying push it down and go work at a homeless shelter or something. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But what I am saying is the purpose of getting better, the purpose for using the tools, the purpose for moving forward is not truly so that you can be better. It's so that you can be better to help other people. And that's where you re-engage with that purpose and that identity.
Well, it feels like I need to remind folks that if you feel like, if this is reaching out to you, speaking to you, and you want to get some help or you want to offer help, lots of things you can do. Go check out mightyoaksprograms.org online, mightyoaksprograms.org. You can also, of course, check out voiceandvisioninc.org, and we'll have those links in the information in the show notes for this week's podcast as well. So, guys, let's focus on, let's maybe look at a couple of things as we wrap up this week to talk about, for those that are, hey, we're still here. We've got to move our way forward. Some things to focus on when it maybe gets a little tough, right? It's still you're having those struggles. What's some things, Jeremy, that you've seen or that you'd like to share with the listeners on how to move forward and how to persevere?
Yeah. Well, I'll preface this with, this is another story from the Bible, right? And so if you're not...
Well, you're a pastor's kid and a pastor.
I'm and I don't know another way to explain this, right? But This has been so helpful to me. And the story is an amazing one. It's found in the Old Testament as well. A guy by the name of Nehemiah, incredible story. I'll give you the summary. He had been taken from his home to a foreign kingdom. He was serving for a foreign king, and found out that his hometown of Jerusalem had been destroyed. The walls had been burned down. In fact, the Bible says they were in a heap, right? He found out about this while he was working in another kingdom. And by working, I mean he was a slave in another kingdom. And the king there, who he was working for, found out that this had happened and cared about Nehemiah, even though he had been brought into the kingdom as a slave. And long story short, he sends Nehemiah back to Jerusalem. He says, hey, you will have all of the resources you need. You use whatever you have to of mine to rebuild those walls. So this is a crazy story, right? And he goes to Jerusalem, Nehemiah does, gets the people there together, explains what he's going to do, and he leads them in rebuilding the walls in like 54 days, which is, it's incredible. Like it's this miraculous thing that happens in the Bible, right?
Right.
So we have all of these things happening. So we have to put ourselves in this context. The miraculous happens. When a person has struggled with trauma or is struggling with trauma and they find hope and purpose and direction and renewed identity, and they're able to engage with other people, that's a miraculous event. I mean, to go from hopelessness to hope, to go from brokenness to a wholeness that allows you to, have a good marriage and engage in your relationships and be useful in a world outside of the uniform. That's a miracle when that happens. And you'd think that we'd be able to look at that every day and go, man, that was a miracle. And I'm so excited to be alive today. What happens, though, is often, even after the miracle, we're reminded for some reason, something happens, we're reminded about our past, and we get this, I haven't really gone anywhere. I haven't really made progress. I'm still here. Nothing has changed. And it's crazy that it happens, but it happens to all of us. So it happened with these people that Nehemiah was working with in the Old Testament. They did this thing. God worked an amazing miracle, but there were some people in town that didn't like it, and they started to accuse these people. They started to say things like, that wall you built, it's going to fall down. You may think you did something special, but you didn't. In fact, you're probably going to die, right? Like, it was terrible.
Jeez. Wow.
And when we get to Nehemiah chapter 4, these people that didn't like the workers who built the walls around Jerusalem are standing, and literally standing physically, accusing Nehemiah and those workers of doing wrong and working against God and saying all these terrible things to them. So Nehemiah is standing, like, you got to get the picture, right? He's standing literally between the accusers and the people that just experienced this great miracle. And he knows that they're starting to have doubts. In Nehemiah chapter 4, if you were in the Bible, Nehemiah chapter 4, verse number 14, this is what it says. And I looked and rose up. So this is Nehemiah speaking. I looked, I rose up and said to the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people. So with the naysayers and the accusers there, with the people who had done the work, he kind of turns his back on the people who are making the accusation, right? And this is important, man. When you start to have these doubts and those voices whisper in your head, you've got to turn your back on that stuff. And you have to turn around and say, okay, what's true here? This is what Nehemiah was doing. He heard the accusations, the other people did too. He turned his back on that and he said, what's true here? Here's what he said. He said to the rulers and to the rest of the people, number one, be not afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your houses. He said a couple very important things. Number one, he said, don't be afraid of them. And it's amazing how we allow fear to overwhelm us. He started by saying, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. We could say it like this in our context. Look, I know it's hard. I know you have doubts. I know you're going through things right now. But what you're going through right now does not have to determine your future. Don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of those voices. Don't be afraid of what's happening in your mind right now. Because if you allow fear to overwhelm you, then you stop moving forward. So his admonition to don't be afraid, it wasn't like stop feeling afraid. He was literally, I think, saying to them, don't let what they're saying keep you from moving forward. Don't be afraid.
Well,
that's one thing to say. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's so appropriate even to modern life, whether you're a veteran or not, right? I mean, everything that we are experiencing in our world today. Don't be afraid, and
Yep.
the fight can be worth it.
Yep. And fear, it causes us to believe, back to this hopelessness that we talked about in the last episode, it causes us to believe there's no hope. And so we just stop, right? So, however we frame the enemy wants to say these things because the enemy can win without even fighting, because they can cause us to be afraid. And that enemy sometimes is us, cause us to be afraid. So we stop moving forward. So he starts there. Don't be afraid. And then he tells them how to move forward, which is helpful. To just say don't be afraid isn't really that helpful. But he says, don't be afraid. And then here's what you need to do. First of all, remember the Lord, which is great and terrible. Man, again, put this in your own context as you listen to this. But he said, remember the Lord. Here's what he was saying. Don't forget what has happened. Don't forget. You have these people accusing you and saying that what you've done is worthless. It's going to fall down. It's not going to work. Don't forget what happened. I think he's saying to them, look at this miracle. Don't forget that. And we need to be reminded from time to time about the miracle that's happened in our lives. I encourage people, sometimes to journal through the good things and even the difficult things. So Absolutely. They have a record of that, right? Mm-hmm. To sit down and talk to friends and family members who have seen a change in their life and just rehearse some of those things. We can't forget. We need to remember what has already taken place in our lives. And that's what Nehemiah was saying. Look, you may feel stuck and you may feel like you're in the same place that you were before, but you're not. Don't be afraid. Where you are right now doesn't determine your future. And remember what has happened. It's been amazing what's happened. So you remember, right? And then he takes him to the next thing. He says, and fight. And fight. We need to be willing to stand up and fight. And
especially for ourselves.
For ourselves, I mean, when we talk about mental health and we talk about these issues, we talk about the suicide epidemic among veterans in the United States, and it's horrible. And we could go through all the numbers. It's not necessary. It's horrible. We need to stop being afraid. Don't let what's happening right now or how you feel right now keep you from moving forward. Then we need to remember the good things that have brought us to where we are right now. And then we need to be committed once again and maybe recommitted to fight. I'm going to fight for my mental health. I'm going to fight for those things that are important to me. I'm going to fight to take the next step and to do the next thing. A lot of resources are available. A lot of people will help you, but all of this kind of boils down to each one of us individually making the decision to fight.
Absolutely.
And once you do that, people will come alongside, but it starts there.
Reverend, come on in.
Listen, Jeremy, I totally agree with you. But also, in some instances, some must surrender. Some of us have to surrender because some people try to fight the battle on their own. They try to take it on themselves.
Yeah.
And they have to surrender to know that God can send people in your life that can help you.
Are you saying like surrender to the possibility of help?
Yes. Surrender to the possibility of help and surrender to know that listen, I'm not the great. I can't do it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that's still strength, right? That's still fighting. That's still fighting for yourself.
I was going to say a big part of fighting is saying I can't do it myself.
Yeah.
You look at the last part of this verse, and he says fight, but then he goes on for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Right? He says don't forget what you're fighting for.
Yep.
And I think that's the starting point. Surrender is a huge part of this. It's surrendering to the reality that I can't do this on my own. I need people around me. The fighting is, but we're going to move forward, and I'm going to find those people, and I'm going to let them help me.
Yeah.
And I know I can't do it on my own,
Exactly.
And sometimes fighting is fighting against your own will and your own, pride or whatever.
I was going to say you're surrendering your own pride, really, is what I'm hearing here. So, and that's and that obviously can be hard for military veterans because as you're going through your career, you're taught to be strong, right?
That's it.
So how do you accept the word surrender unto yourself? But I think at some point, right, we realize, okay, I can't do this, and that's where maybe the healing starts to happen, and you can get the help you need.
Yeah.
The biggest fight is the fight within ourselves. That's the biggest battle of all.
Oh, yeah.
We have within ourselves.
I've heard it referred to as the 6-inch war between your ears.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Man, that's right. Yep.
Well, we'll wrap it up with this, guys. So what I'm hearing is victory's possible. Things are worth fighting for, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there is victory, and it's going to be a slow road. But, again, as we mentioned, there's a lot of help available. but you have to make that decision to take the next step. And man, be glad about what has happened, right? Don't forget what's happened.
There you go.
And you'll find that victory for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for being here once again. Great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Hopefully our listeners found it informative, helpful, inspiring. And if you've got questions, you need help, you want to reach out, lots of things you can do. Again, go to mightyoaksprograms.org and just apply. That's the first step. We talked about that on the prior episode. If you did not check that one out, go check out the prior episode with Jeremy on there. And again, you can go to mightyoaksprograms.org. We'll have the information in the show notes description as well. You can always reach out to the team at voiceandvisioninc.org, and we'll have that on there for you, or call them at 800-734-5665. Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. Really inspiring. Really enjoyed chatting with you and learned so much. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I had a wonderful time.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us so you can catch more great content like this with our fantastic guests that we try to bring here each and every time for you to hopefully, pick out some useful nuggets of information that helps you along your journey here on Untold Valor, Veterans Recovery in Action. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify or whatever platform you like using. You can find all that information in the show notes as well. And we will see you next time here on the show. You've been listening to Untold Valor by Voice and Vision. We hope you found the information and resources discussed today helpful. As always, thank you for listening and for your support. Remember to stay connected with us through our various social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Don't forget to visit the website, voiceandvisioninc.org. That's voiceandvisioninc.org, where you can sign up for our blog and find free resources and information on upcoming events, webinars, workshops, and get support. You can also access our free help and hope guide for individuals and families struggling with substance use and addiction. If someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help because you and your life matter. Remember, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available to you at any time by dialing 988. We are all ambassadors of hope and recovery. And if you want to share your story, please contact us. Compeer Corps is also looking for veteran mentor volunteers and veteran participants. To find out more information about Compeer Corps, please call 610-541-0790. That's 610-541-0790. You can find all the links and contact information for the resources mentioned on today's episode by checking the description and the show notes section of your app. Thank you again for tuning in and for your support. Until next time, this has been Untold Valor.